audience, Guy. I'm here with End of Sentence Podcast. This is Quinn Lapeyre. We are going to be talking a little bit about recovery, different paths to recovery, the harm reduction model, and a recovery home that he has partnered with. So we're going to start this off just with a couple questions. Have you personally struggled with substance abuse?
Yes, absolutely. For 18 years, I was a coke and heroin addict.
Wow, that's a long time. I was very young when I was addicted. I was 15 when I started, but I was 18 when I was incarcerated for a year, and that actually completely saved me. So I was blessed in that way. Like it was definitely the hardest thing I ever went through.
Mhm.
But it was a short time compared to a lot of people. So that is that's intense, 18 years.
Yeah, right.
So
Never
how
thought
long
I
have
would.
you been sober then?
So that's a tricky question. Depends on what people call sober. I look at addiction a little bit differently. Um, I I use medical cannabis for my mental health conditions because after 18 years of doing coke and heroin, you can imagine your brain's pretty mush and experienced a lot of issues. And So when I got clean from my drugs of choice, coke and heroin, they told me, yeah, you need to be taking Adderall and Xanax and Wellbutrin and lithium for my mental health conditions. And I was like, I don't want to get back on that routine. I don't want to be taking 4 or 5 pills a day.
Right.
So what are the alternatives? And my doctor recommended medical cannabis, and that helps me not have to take 4 pills a day, two of which are highly addictive, and the other two are psychoactives. Sorry, is that right? Psychoactive? No, that's not the right word, but they're used for, you know, mental health conditions that are pretty intense. So for me, that was a better option for me to be on cannabis than for me to have to take 4 pills a day. So I've been doing that. I've been off of my drugs of choice though since October of 2020. So a little over 3 years.
Congratulations. That's
Thank
awesome.
you.
Super inspiring. I feel like a lot of people can relate to, not wanting to take pharmaceuticals, whether it's because they've struggled with it in the past or they have other health conditions or just like a general fear. Like I feel like that's something a lot of people can relate to personally. I have anxiety, PTSD, depression, and I have medical cannabis as well. So that's like a big thing that jumped out to me when I was scrolling through Facebook and I saw the ad for the men's tribal house. Super weird that it popped up for me personally, because I was like, one, I'm a female, two, I'm in Florida. But I was really glad that I did because it talked to it talks about, so why don't you tell me about the men's tribal house?
Sure. So Men's Tribal House is a sober living, where we aren't so concerned about perfection. Our our hope is that people progress in their recovery. So whatever that looks like, if somebody needs to be on medical assisted treatment, whether it's Suboxone or methadone or Sublocade, uh, me personally, I've done all of them. I've taken methadone, tried to get sober that way, tried to do Suboxone. I've done cold turkey. I've done it all, and so I know the importance of taking steps to get to recovery because for me, when I didn't have my mental health like under control, I would go into these manic states and then I'd end up relapsing. And the reason that was because I was basically trying to raw dog my mental health. And so what we promote is that we just want to see people recover. Like, I don't care if it's through Suboxone, I don't care if it's through methadone, whatever steps it's going to take to get somebody off the streets and out of that lifestyle so that they can get to the next stepping stone of where we need to be. That is what's important to me. So, anyway, so we're just more so concerned in what is it going to take to get you on that recovery path. And if we're starting to accept Suboxone, methadone, Sublocade, It makes no sense to tell somebody, oh, you have a prescription for something. You're not allowed to have that.
Yeah.
If we're going to let people come into sober living or rehab and be on Adderall and be on Xanax and be on Sublocade and Suboxone and methadone, makes no sense that a doctor would prescribe something for you that just because it's not in pill form, we're going to turn that away. So what we did was we decided, well, for us, plants are healthier. It's an unprocessed plant. Um, and we condone that. We want people to be able to recover whatever way it's going to take. And so Men's Tribal House is med card friendly.
Yeah.
Um, doesn't necessarily mean that we're like, hey, you've got to get on, Suboxone, or you got to start smoking weed to come here. Just we're just more
Open to it.
open. Yeah, we're just more open to any recovery path as long as you're making steps towards getting better.
I think that is just a really new way of thinking of things that like we haven't seen in the past with like other recovery methods where people are expected to be like either cold turkey or detoxing in like a certain environment that might not be the best for them. Like everybody's path to recovery is different. Like you said, what works for one person might not work for another, or they might need it in steps. So like the harm reduction concept, like doing anything as long as it's a step forward, as long as you're making progress, whether
Right.
it's like like providing clean needles or um, not maybe not in a sober home, but this is a blanket term. There's all these steps that can lead to sobriety, recovery, or at least a more functional life. And I think it's important to understand that recovery is a step-by-step process and there needs
Yeah,
to be resources available for people on each step, not
absolutely.
just people who are rock bottom and then people who are doing great. There's so many levels in between that get ignored. So I think it's awesome that you have a home where people on all different levels can sort of like interact, help each other, share their stories, and not be judged for
Yeah.
that.
For me, I tried abstinence, and that model of, you're only sober if you're abstinent didn't really sit well with me, especially when I have mental health conditions.
Right,
Because what that was telling me was either you have to freaking go unmedicated for your mental health and get into these repeative manic states where I make terrible decisions, or I can go medicated and be in the right state of mind so that I can make better choices. And to me, that's what sobriety is. I'm not going to tell somebody who has to take a mood or mind altering substance that they are not sober if they are prescribed that thing. Like, I'm not a
right,
doctor. I don't get to tell you, oh, you've got cancer, but you can raw dog cancer. You can't take any painkillers, you can't take anything for the cancer because it's mood or mind altering. To me, that makes no sense.
right.
So for me, like I mentioned, I look at addiction a little bit differently. It's more so, are you doing this to heal or are you doing this to escape? Is it the
Yeah,
obsession or are you actually proactively trying to understand your addiction, where you're at, what you need for yourself? For some people, they get to, go completely abstinent, and I think that's freaking awesome. I think
yeah,
I love that for anybody that it works. I'm not here trying to say that abstinence doesn't work or that AA doesn't work or that these abstinence-based programs don't work. They absolutely do. I'm not here for the people. I'm not here trying to convince people to do something else if it's working for you. I'm just here
right.
to provide another pathway to recovery.
Hmm.
And I think the more we help include each other and lift each other and help each other and say, "Hey man, you're on Suboxone. I'm proud of you. What's the next step?" The next step is, oh, well, my next step is that I'm going to get off Suboxone. I'm going to take the
Yeah,
Sublocade shot, and then hopefully I don't have to do that anymore. But to somebody who's got a mental health condition or some kind of disease, some kind of cancer, some kind of ailment, who am I to say, oh, you can't take that or you're not sober? I don't even
right.
know that person. And so this stigma is what I'm really trying to get rid of.
Yeah.
And I think doing podcasts and things like this is where we're able to try and educate people.
Yeah, I think it's important. There's such a negative stigma around so many things, especially when it comes to addiction, whether it's addiction itself, recovery and from addiction, the things that come along with it, whether you have a criminal record, choices that you've made in the past, mental health conditions. Um, so yeah, like you said, anything that you can do to like share your story, educate others, and spread that message, I think is super important. Um,
Absolutely, I agree. And I
so
think that if you ask the majority of people, the majority of people didn't go cold turkey. They didn't get sober cold turkey.
mhm,
I'm not saying nobody did. Obviously, a lot of people do. I've done it before as well. But there's probably a bigger percentage of people who had to take steps to get to where they were, whether it
yeah,
was trying to not use every day or trying to get on methadone or Suboxone or some kind of medical assisted treatment or do a medical detox or go to rehab. Those are all, harm reduction because most of us don't get it the first time, right? And we're not one chip wonders, as they call it.
mhm,
It's a very rare sight. So if you didn't succeed the first time, that's you trying again is proof, that there are steps that need to be taken. I didn't do it the
right.
first time. I was in active addiction for 18 years. I tried getting sober hundreds of times. I got sober hundreds of times. Maybe not 100, but I got sober at least like 20 or 30 times. And I've done it every single way. And to me, my recovery is unique to me, just like yours is to you, just like Josh's is to his, or Angel's is to his. It's all unique. And something is going to work differently. You might have mental health conditions. This person might have, cancer. That person might. It doesn't, as long as you're on the path to recovery and you're trying and you're being honest with yourself, that's what's important to me because I can meet you where you're at and then we can get better together.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's super important. You mentioned something earlier when I had asked you, like, how long had you been sober? And you were like, well, I've been, sober from my drugs of choice for 18 years. And I think that's important. Like, you shouldn't discredit like these milestones just because it's taken like steps or it's taken time.
Right.
Like, oh, I guess, like I've been clean for this long, but then I've been doing this for this long. So I've only actually been clean for this long. Like, no, like give yourself credit for that
Yeah.
whole time that you've been taking these steps and these actions. Like for me, I have been clean from my drug of choice. May will be 11 years, but
Nice.
it's taken me steps. I'm messed around with other things. I drank too much sometimes. I realized that wasn't working for me either. And I cut
Yeah.
back on that. And it's been harm reduction even since then. Just because I stopped touching that drug of choice doesn't mean I stopped making mistakes along the
Absolutely.
way. But I
Absolutely.
still know that I did that and I'm proud of myself for that. And I think that's important for everybody, even if it's taking you steps. Give yourself credit for each step that it's taken you because each step is hard.
Yes, absolutely. I agree. And I think that, you know, I think addiction is a lot like believing in a higher power. You know, people are afraid to believe in God or a higher power because they're like, man, I can't be perfect. I'm still a sinner. And I actually dealt with that very same thing. I was trying to follow my higher power, but I was still using. And in my mind, I was like, I'm not worthy. I'm not worthy to
Right.
believe in God because I'm a sinner and I continue to sin. But that's the beauty of it is that we will never be perfect. Our recovery will never look perfect to anybody, right? Because everybody's going to judge no matter what we do. And to believe in something and say, hey, you know what? I'm giving my life over to a higher power, just like I'm giving my life over to recovery. People think, oh, I can't make that commitment to never do anything ever again. Just like I can't make the commitment to follow God because I know that I'm still sinning. I know I can't be perfect, so why would I even try when I know that I'm going to continue to sin? And it's the same with recovery. It's like why, a lot of people are the stigma that surrounds abstinence and sobriety is that if you don't do it perfectly, you don't get to claim that. And to me, that doesn't make a whole lot of sense because I've been in the rooms. I was the big book thumper like 2 years ago. I was going to AA every single day. I was required to.
Hmm.
So I learned the big book front to back. And as I'm reading it and it says no mood or mind altering substances, the book is law, right? In AA, the book is law. But then you got these people who are like, oh, but caffeine isn't a mood or mind altering substance, or nicotine isn't, or, whatever. But that's just them altering the laws of the
Yeah.
big book. So if
Yeah.
you're going to alter the laws of the big book, then why don't I get to do that with medical cannabis? Or why don't I get to do that with medical assisted treatment? So if we're all just making up our own program, then all these people who are like, oh, you're not sober, you're not this, or you're not that, if you don't do it through abstinence, are also really just working their own program. And what they're telling you is that I can't do that. I can't do medical cannabis. I can't have a drink, just one drink on New Year's or for Christmas or whatever. They're telling you what they can't accomplish, but that's not me. And I found that, like I mentioned, taking medical cannabis instead of having to take 4 prescriptions every day, that's what's working for me. And maybe that doesn't work for me tomorrow. Maybe tomorrow I use cannabis and I'm like, oh man, I just want to get high so bad, and then I'll change the way that I look at what I'm doing. But for
Yeah.
now, it's working. And so I'm not going to change that for anybody because nobody's seen where I was. Nobody knew, who I was 4 years ago when I was living under a bridge in Atlanta after getting shot over a $60 drug deal, and where I was on my knees crying for God to take my life because I couldn't do it anymore. Today, I don't feel that way.
Yeah.
And it's because my mental health conditions are regulated and
Yeah,
my frontal
absolutely.
cortex is not off off center and off, balance and everything else, to where I'm making these irrational decisions. Oh, I got in a fight with my mom. Screw everything. I'm just going to go use. I don't make those kind of correlations anymore because my mental health is like, hey, we got in an argument, things happen, give us some time, let them cool down, and then we'll revisit it. I'm able to make those decisions for
Yeah.
myself. Um, I have a brand called Cali Sober. Well, the company is actually Sober Gear. I'm wearing one of the shirts. It's Party Sober. Uh, I advocate for recovery. I don't advocate for necessarily any certain path. But when people ask me, are you abstinent? Are you sober? Are you clean? I don't claim to be clean because there's people out there who bust their ass and who are white knuckling it through AA and going through these manic episodes because they think that they have to be completely abstinent for their sobriety to mean anything. I don't feel that way. Um, but I don't consider myself clean because those people are suffering. Some of those people are suffering to be able to claim that title of being clean. I'm not clean because if you test me, I'm gonna piss hot, right? But I am sober because sobriety is a state of mind, and being clean or being dirty is a physical state. So to me, sobriety is clarity. Sobriety is doing the right thing. Sobriety is working towards your goal of recovery. Um, the term is Cali sober, California sober. It's a term that Demi Lovato kind of made popular, and I just kind of ran with it because it's the way that I recovered, and I found, relief from my obsession through that. Um, but I don't claim to be clean. I do claim sobriety, um, because I work my ass off for that too, and I think
Yeah.
I deserve that.
I think that's a really great way to put it. That's something that I've been struggling with. Like, what do I call myself? As somebody who uses medical cannabis, as somebody who's had to take steps to get where I am, somebody who believes in the umbrella term of harm reduction, and like what that means to me is different for other people. And what am I? I really like that description because, like you said, like how you said, clean and dirty, physical, sobriety, mental, and that makes a
Yeah,
lot of sense. I think
absolutely.
that's
Because you
something that
wouldn't
can be
tell,
helpful for people.
yeah, absolutely. Because you wouldn't tell somebody who has diabetes. You wouldn't tell them, "Hey, you're not clean and you're not sober." They need that. They
Yeah.
need the insulin. And if they don't have it, they'll die. And insulin is a mood or mind altering substance because if you don't have insulin, you will die. So that
Yeah,
mood or mind altering. So it's the same thing, it's the same thing with mental health conditions. If you have a mental health condition and you've got to take lithium, Wellbutrin, whatever, and is prescribed to you by a doctor, who am I to tell you, oh, you're not abstinent, you're not sober, you're not clean, you're not this, when taking those medications keeps you from making those impulse decisions that often lead to relapse.
yeah. So I think that, like, obviously, I think we can agree that like AA, it works for some people and it might not work for other people. There's helpful things that they teach. Absolutely. It's definitely, you can't say that it doesn't work because it's worked for so many people, but then there's also a lot of people that it hasn't worked for. Um, they have like these phrases that have stuck in my head. I think a lot of people, even who haven't been to AA, have heard a lot of them.
Hmm.
One of them that I remember a lot and think of a lot, like in my studies and what I'm trying to do is like once an addict, always an addict. What is like your thoughts on that? Do you feel that like that's true, that somebody who, if you were an addict in the past, you are always an addict? Like, would you call yourself an addict today?
I do not. I don't identify as an addict because I don't have addict behaviors or addict characteristics. I'm a firm believer in self-fulfilling prophecy, where if I tell myself
Absolutely.
consistently that I am something, then I will start to assume those behaviors, whatever that is like, whether it's introverted or freaking crazy or whatever, because I will start to tell people, hey, this is what I am, and those people will expect those behaviors out of me.
Yeah,
So why would I, after 3 years of being Cali sober, why would I identify as something that I don't have those characteristics? I just want to say real quick, AA is an amazing program.
yeah, absolutely.
It's the people who have shifted this program.
You
It's the
mentioned
people
that,
who,
yeah.
yeah, it's the people who have put the stigma on others. But they're not all like that. I have been to different AA meetings where they have the same, you know, well, some of the people have the same sort of mentality that I do is like, hey, if you're trying, you're on the right path. Even
Yeah,
if it's not
absolutely.
sober to me or clean to me, like you're on the right path. So not all AAs are like that. It's important to note that the steps that AA embodies, that is what's important.
Absolutely.
It's not the whole freaking, the rest of the book, because AA in itself is only the first 69 pages of the big book, and everything after that is just testimonials and doctor's notes and all that other stuff. So that first 69 pages, if you try not to get too deep into, higher power and giving yourself over, giving your will over to God and admitting and all these other things. If you try not to look too deep into those things, me personally, I realize that the steps are amazing. What they
Yeah,
embody is amazing. It's the people who have shifted it and want this pride of like, hey, I'm doing it exactly how I'm supposed to do it, but I pick and choose and blah blah. It's like, I don't care. You do whatever you want. Me personally, I believe that the steps of AA are amazing. Um, it's also important to note that Bill Wilson, the co-founder of AA, did a psychedelic experience in 1934 called the Townes-Lambert cure. 1934. That's 2 years before AA was founded. And in a letter to the great philosopher Carl Jung, he said, as a result of having this treatment, the Townes-Lambert cure in New York, December 1934, I have had a spiritual awakening. And then comes and founds AA not even 2 years later, and then puts in the 12th step, as a result of working these steps, we have a spiritual awakening, blah, blah, blah. That spiritual awakening he attributed to this treatment, a
mhm,
psychedelic treatment. So, and then in 1956, he also experimented with LSD, trying to help people reach that spiritual awakening. So, Bill Wilson was a plant advocate,
yeah,
and in fact, in 1934, no drug was illegal. You could walk out to the gas station, or you could walk out to the pharmacy and get cocaine off the shelf without a prescription. You could get heroin, you could get whatever you wanted. So in 1934 and in 1936, drugs were not even illegal. So the program of Alcoholics Anonymous is just that. It's the program for alcoholics. And if you
Yeah,
actually look up the definition of sobriety, it means not drunk from alcohol. So all these people who are like, oh, you're not this, you're not that in AA, it's like you don't even know the program.
yeah,
I have ADHD and I hyper focused on this program for 9 months. You know what I mean? Like I
yeah.
saw all the loopholes, I saw all the freaking the flaws and all this stuff. And so I started to look into Bill Wilson. Who is this guy and what is the
Hmm.
spiritual awakening that he's talking about? And that's where I started to discover, and all these people, not all of them, but a lot of people just follow something blindly in hopes that it's going to get them to where they want to go. And they don't actually do the research into the psychology of what is happening in the brain. Where is those neurological passages being formed? What is the habit loop? They're just regurgitating whatever they taught, whatever they were taught, and they feel strongly about. And that's great.
Yeah,
Do whatever works for you, but telling people that they're not this or that when you're not technically sober from all mood or mind altering substances, and then going out and telling people that they're not sober makes no sense to me.
yeah.
On top of that, people, so many things, everything can be a mood or mind altering substance. You go and, you have unprotected sex and then you have to take the day after pill. That's a mood or mind altering substance. Does that mean that that should cost you your sobriety? I don't think so.
Yeah,
And so this idea of no mood or mind altering substances, I don't even think that that was his idea. Because like I said, he did psychedelics for 3 days. and
yeah,
then and then 2 years later comes out with AA. And then also experimented with LSD in 1956. So obviously he didn't really believe that. Or at least that wasn't that wasn't the way he intended it to be perceived. That's my opinion at least.
yeah.
And there's proof. I mean, you can look up, the relationship between Carl Jung and Bill Wilson and see that they were really good friends. They talked a lot about the spiritual awakening and AA and everything else, and a lot of Carl Jung's philosophies, were impacting Bill Wilson.
I think what's really exciting now is that we are starting to see at least some of the stigmas dissolve from certain paths to treatment and recovery with like whether it be like microdosing, the mushrooms, hallucinogens, um, all medical cannabis. We're
Mhm.
starting to see like some more acceptance of that, more research into that, which is pretty exciting.
Yeah.
Um,
So that's what I did. I did a After 18 years of my addiction, I was like, I freaking I got to do something different because I've tried everything, methadone, Suboxone, everything else, abstinence, blah, blah, blah. And then I heard about microdosing. I heard about ibogaine and ayahuasca and this, like, the Great Reset and all this other stuff, the ego death and everything. And that's what I did. I went and did a psychedelic journey. And psychedelics themselves are not the answer to getting sober. Psychedelics, what they do is that they allow you to be in the state of mind to ask yourself the most important questions. Psychedelics will not get you sober, but they will get you into the state to where you can ask yourself the most important questions and be able to heal.
yeah,
They're not some cure-all drug. They're not freaking gonna replace anything, but they will get you to ask yourself like, "Hey, what is it that you want? What is it that you're running from? Why do you feel the need to mask why do you feel the need to escape this life?
yeah.
Why do you have the need to feel validated?" Those are the important questions I asked myself. And once I got to the bottom of those, the obsession of wanting to escape my life just disappeared.
Well, when we talk about like recovery and steps, that's like a very important step is you can't just I mean, you can, I guess, just stop, but you really like without getting to the root of what's caused this behavior in the first place, is it really, have you really stopped or have you just paused? You
Right.
know? So I think it's important whether however you get to the point of being comfortable enough with yourself to ask those questions, it's a super important step. You have to be honest with yourself and
Absolutely.
with others, and it does help to have a community, and that's something that AA did teach me that is beneficial of that kind of group, you know. But like there's pros and cons to every path of recovery. It's not an easy thing. There's no easy way.
Mm,
There's no
absolutely.
guaranteed this works for everyone.
Right.
Um, you got to be ready to take those steps. You got to be ready to fail. Um, and you got to be ready to try again. You
Yeah.
know, it's definitely like we've been talking about, just different for everyone. Do you have any advice for someone who is sort of new in their recovery or maybe hasn't started yet but wants to?
Sure. Yeah, I have well, I can only really speak on my experience. I can't tell anybody what they should do, what they shouldn't do. For me, because I had tried so many times, I've been to rehab, I've been to AA, I've been to sober living, I did whatever. Because I have tried so many different things, I started to pick up little pieces from AA and little pieces from non-traditional programs and this rehab and that rehab and psychology and substance abuse courses and all these things. And I can't say that I am 100% AA or that I'm 100% medical cannabis or I'm 100%. What I've done is I've just taken the most important things that resonate with me and taken those and said, you know what? I like this. I like
Yeah,
being able to have somebody greater than myself that I can have faith in, and that works for me. Not saying it's going to work for everybody. I like the idea of taking a moral inventory. I like the idea of being honest with ourselves. So my my advice would be try it. Try whatever it is. Take a course on substance abuse. Take a course on psychology. Start to understand, why does my brain work like this? Look into neurological passages. Look into neuroplasticity. Look into the habit loop. Look into what is it that our brains constantly thrive on, and that's dopamine. Our brains are only ever looking for dopamine. So it doesn't matter what it is. If you're doing a drug, if you're having sex, if you're freaking playing video games or a sport or winning a marathon, the reward is always dopamine. And our brains are always going to be searching for that dopamine. And that's probably one of the most important things that I learned is that when I get into these modes of wanting to, escape or whatever, that's just what I trained my brain to think. But that's not the reality. What my brain is telling me is, hey, I'm craving stimulation. Where's the dopamine? And so I just have to do something that has a high dopamine release, service work, exercise, yoga, whatever it is. But I didn't know that just going to AA. I didn't know that just going to, rehab or whatever. I had to take different
yeah,
steps and learn different things to understand my addiction. My advice is do whatever it takes to understand your addiction, where that comes from, where it stems from, um, and start taking those steps to heal. Go to AA, see if you like it. I would recommend going to AA for at least a week because that first couple times you're just like, ah, maybe this isn't for me. But then after a while, you're like, oh, wait a minute, that makes sense now. They weren't actually telling me that I have to do this and that's the only way. What they're saying is this is a suggestion. If
right.
you want if you want what we have, try it.
Yeah,
And if it's not for you, you can always leave, you know? So just keep trying. If you're trying to
mhm.
get sober, just keep trying. Check it out.
That's
Different
the best
programs, different
advice that I think you
modalities.
can really give someone, honestly. Just try it, you know?
Yeah.
Is there anything else that you wanted to say about what you're doing right now or what you have going on, what you're involved in?
Yeah, so we are actually in the process of trying to find a women's facility. So if anybody wants to partner with us, donate, whatever, we would love to get any kind of support so that we can get a women's facility going. It would be an all women's facility ran by women. I know that women are a little bit harder to get into recovery because they have a lot more to worry about than men. You know, as men, we don't typically have to worry about as much getting sexually harassed or sexually abused or taken advantage of or whatever it is. So it's harder to get women into those programs. I would really love some help if anybody's interested. They can reach out to me on my Facebook. It's Quinn Lapeyre, QuinnLapeyre. I also have, Sober Gear, and that's Sober Gear on Facebook, and of course, Men's Tribal House. And I also have a podcast called A More Spiritual You, where we go and do different spiritual modalities twice a month, and we just discover cool things like yoga, qigong, breath work, things like that. So, A More Spiritual You is the podcast. Check those out.
Great. Well, thank you so much for chatting with me. I think we touched on some really important topics, and I'm really excited to get this out there and, just hopefully educate and encourage people. That's the goal.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
All right. Bye bye.